Hi, everyone. Mark Shamley here, World Federation of Youth Clubs, Chief Operating Officer, based here in rainy Orlando, Florida. Dawn and I and Maureen were talking about the weather challenges from where we reside. And right now in Florida, it's been quite rainy these past few weeks. So welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for taking time to join us for today's webcast on managing challenging employees. It's a really important topic in terms of operating your organizations, and we really are excited about having this expert with us who has decades of experience working with nonprofit organizations around HR matters. So before we get to the introduction of our speaker, of course, we have some few housekeeping items to go over with you today. First, this session is being recorded. Like all of our webcast sessions, this session will be available on demand on the World Federation of Youth Clubs website. So with that, let me advance the slide. So from a housekeeping standpoint, I'll kind of continue to walk through some of the rules of engagement in terms of how we're going to operate today, just as some gentle reminders of making this a terrific experience for you and getting the most out of our presenter today. And then I'll kind of set some things up with some opening remarks and then hand it over to Maureen, and we will make sure that we have ample time for Q&A, right? So use the chat feature if you want to raise your hand and verbally articulate your question, whatever your preference, we'll make that available to you during the session. So that's the agenda. So quickly on the housekeeping side, again, we are recording this session. The link will be emailed to you. And then we encourage everyone to stay on mute throughout the presentation, right? And this way it keeps the background noise at a minimal. And then, but we will open things up during Q&A and of course, you have the ability to use chat. This is our preference, the speaker view in Zoom. If you're sitting in front of a computer, I know many of you access these sessions using your mobile devices, that's fine. But if you are in front of your computers, we recommend that you click on the speaker view, which you can find in the upper right-hand corner, and you just click on speaker view and then choose your preference there. So that's just some tips to make your experience more enjoyable. So again, I am Mark Shamley. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the World Federation of Youth Clubs. Normally what we'd always try to do a little bit of sort of revisiting, if you will, of World Federation of Youth Clubs and the work that we do. So I just want to touch on those things real quickly before we get into our introduction of our speaker. Mission, why we are here, the work that we do is centered around the development and the advancement and the enhancement of your organizations. That is why we exist. The thing that makes us, that connects the dots between all of our organizations around the world is this idea of creating a positive environment for young people and a safe place for young people to go under the guidance of adult supervision, right? That's what makes us unique. And our purpose is, hey, if every young person, every child who has the opportunity should have the opportunity and access to organizations like yours around the world. That's the world we'd like to see happen. That's our purpose and why we exist as an organization. How do we add value to you as part of being part of the World Federation of Youth Clubs? We start with the fact that we want to maintain that we are going to be a high-touch organization. So what does that mean, Mark? Basically, you could pick up the phone and call someone. You could pick up the phone and call Glenn. You can pick up the phone and call Jose. Pick up the phone and call myself or Dawn. Whatever your concern, whatever the thing that you're challenged with, we want to be available to you even as we grow as an organization. And we're now 67 organizations strong, operating in about 35 countries worldwide. So along that, we are going to grow and become more focused around three key areas of our value proposition. One, we're going to guide and consult. That, and the way we do that is that personalized assistance. That's the consultation work that you guys are getting directly from the team. We're going to continue to do the assessments around MAP and TAP. And then around that, once we gain some understanding of needs and gap areas, develop programs and trainings and other kinds of initiatives to close those learning gaps and opportunities to improve your capacity as an organization. Thirdly, we're an organization that creates opportunities for networking and learning, right? And we do that through collaborations, but also we do that with our international conference, which we just had earlier this year. And we're going to continue to build on the success we had in February to make that conference even better. And the webcasts are these monthly touch points that we can curate content and work with folks like 501c services to bring information to your doorstep. And then lastly, that third area in which we activate our value proposition is around promoting and amplifying the World Federation, but more importantly, promoting and amplifying you and your organizations and your work. And we've already launched the Global Recognition Program, the Promise Awards. Dawn, thank you very much for all your hard work on that. And thank you, all of the affiliates who have submitted applications to be considered for the Promise Awards. We're super excited with that program coming up and the recognition event that will be happening later this summer. And then, of course, the mini grants that we offer to you to scale up your organizations in a very targeted, focused way. So that's kind of how we see what we do in the work and the value we provide to you guys, just as a reminder of the work that we do. So with that, resources, again, we touched on the consultation. We have a terrific and growing network of collaborators. We just added Sport Court to the mix. They were featured in our newsletter. I mentioned the annual conference. We've already started working on content and structure and all those things for the annual conference. So we'll be well ahead of the game. I mentioned the Promise Awards. We just saw the monthly newsletter and the webcast. There's so much going on at the World Federation of Youth Clubs. So with that, I want to do a quick pause, okay? Take a deep breath, and we're going to do a little bit of a chat check-in, okay? And our chat check-in this time is going to be, what is your favorite snack? Okay, so put it in the chat. While you're putting in the chat, my favorite snack is popcorn. Ever since I was a little boy, coming in the house, the smell of popcorn, I knew I was going to be sitting down watching a sporting event, basketball game, football game, whatever. For me, that's the thing that gets me. If someone's popping popcorn in the office, I will find my way to that office and snack on some of that popcorn. So that's my favorite snack. So Dawn, do we have any other folks who are providing their favorite snacks?
I mean, this is apparently TJ and I both love chips and salsa, which is great. So nachos, brownies, mixed nuts, small cakes. Everyone must be hungry this morning. Mango, cheese. I'd say it's time for a meal here.
I think it's time for some diets, actually, Dawn. Like
chocolate chip cookies.
we need a nutritionist
right.
plan or something. So
far, I only see like mangoes and maybe the nuts as a healthier snack here. But
oh, we got mangoes. Good. Yes, we got a healthy option.
That's right.
All right. So thank you, guys. Thank you again. Please use the chat for asking questions during Maureen's presentation. If you have a burning question, throw it in chat. We will get it and get to it. Dawn is watching the chat room, and we will make sure that Maureen or myself or someone responds to your question. So please use the chat or raise your hand, either one. We want to hear from you. All right. Okay. So with that, let's get to our speaker, Maureen Marfell. Maureen her current title is she's the program director at 501c Services. She's been in that organization for 27 years. In 1992, she was asked to design a unique human resources service for nonprofits. That going back to 1992, okay? And in 2006, Boys and Girls Clubs of America decided to contract with 501c services and to have this benefit available to all of this HR benefit available to all of the clubs within that system. And then HR services started as a national toll-free hotline, which had about 1,400 members nationally to call in and discuss, current work-related issues as it relates to their personnel, and use that hotline to ask questions. Since its inception, she and her staff have broadened HR services to include newsletters, complimentary webinars, in-person training, and oversee HR advisory committees made up of nonprofit human resources professionals, CFOs, and executive directors from large and small nonprofits all over the country, and quite frankly, all over the world, if you will. Prior to joining 501c, Maureen had 25 years of HR management experience in the service industry, and she's a member of SHRM, which is here in the United States, the premier HR services association for practitioners, and she's a member of the National Human Services Assembly HR Council. And with that, I introduce you to Maureen Marfell, our speaker today.
Good morning, everyone. Oh, good morning. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. So happy to be here. Thank you for asking me, Mark and Dawn. And I really started out when I was only 10 years old. So been doing HR for a long time. So I hope to deliver a good program to you today on challenging employees. That's what I've been asked to talk about. And it's never easy. I think we can go to the first slide. There we go. And I will say that I get a lot of calls in this area, and it's one of the more popular webinars. I imagine all of you would agree with me today. It's never easy to supervise, is it? It's never easy to confront, but sometimes we need to do that. So that's what I'm going to talk about. Some employees definitely make it particularly difficult, and that's what I'm calling the challenging employee. They can try your patience, frustrate you, and I will talk about those problems that you're faced with yourself and your organization with that type of employee. It can be turned around. I'm a positive person. I'm definitely not going to go on just the negative today when I'm talking about that person. And I hope to provide you with some effective strategies for handling that challenging employee. So next slide. The objectives of today's I almost said webinar presentation are about identifying those challenges associated with supervising those difficult employees and how to manage your own feelings effectively, which is so very important in this process. Sometimes that's not easy to do. We're human, so I'll talk about that. How to create that positive work environment for everyone, not just that challenging employee, because you're not providing a good positive work environment unless you do deal with that person. Focus on problems when talking to an employee, not personalities. Don't get caught up in their personality. You have to focus on the problems, and we'll talk about that further. And of course, you want to respond positively even to that challenging employee and turn them around. So, next slide. Okay, why not just fire? Ask yourself, why don't we just fire this person? It seems like a logical answer because they've taken you to the brink, and it could be your best option. But most often it can be a short-sighted approach. And why? Well, for several important reasons. Believe it or not, even with the most difficult employee, you can turn them around with some patience and the right approach. And by firing this employee, and this is so true, I know it, I talk to people all the time, you could be firing your star employee. They could be talented and the most bright, but man, they're a pain in the you know what. And I'm going to use an example. It comes up a lot, not just with development directors. I'm not picking on them, but you have this wonderful development director. Man, they're great. And they bring in the funding. They're great with the community. They have a purpose, but they're so not nice to the people that report to them, to their peers, and to you, the supervisor. You know, and I'm going to use terms that you're not going to use when you document, but they're obnoxious, they're rude, they don't listen, they yell, and you can't, you should not, you do not have to deal with that. And it's not right, and you're going to lose people over it. And then there's the replacement costs, right? You took all that time and money to bring that great person in. And then you don't want to turn around and have to ask them to leave. And then I don't know, I know I'm talking globally today. I don't know what kind of programs you all have with unemployment. I'm with a company that helps people out with their unemployment costs. And then this could cause you, higher costs with your unemployment rates, compensation, or you might have to fight a discrimination claim or a wrongful termination claim if you don't sit down and deal with this properly. And the whole key is, I want to turn this person around. I truly do. That's what you have to keep on telling yourself. I want to keep them. I want it to work. And you must also consider that employees who appear to be difficult may simply have a personality conflict with their supervisor or with someone in their working environment. And a simple reassignment may solve the problem. Excuse me. That's probably not the case, and you have to be careful with that because that may not help anything, but that could be a problem. So you have to look objectively at that and ask your questions if that might be the case. It doesn't always work, but do look at that. And you don't want to fire. Nobody wants to fire someone. It can affect your whole organization and the morale of that organization, no matter who gets fired. So I don't want to talk about firing today. If it might ultimately happen, but that's the hope is it will not. Yeah, next slide. So we can go, I'm sorry, the next slide. Yes, so begin with yourself. Let's all of us look at ourselves. Go through a checklist for yourself when dealing with the challenging employee. And you need to make sure that your judgments about this employee are objective. Don't get into personality. Don't say, you know, Joe, you're just a real jerk and I can't take you any longer. That's not going to work at all. And it's not a good way to build that relationship with that employee. Always assess the situation honestly. Ask yourself if you may have played a role in creating the difficulty. That's hard for any of us to say to ourselves. But you never know, maybe you were ignoring a problem they were having. Maybe there's a personal situation, or maybe they don't feel like they're appreciated. Maybe you haven't given them enough positive strokes. Always assess that. And you should evaluate the employee's performance and behavior. Performance appraisals are really important, annual performance appraisals. But before an annual performance appraisal, have some kind of program in place for yourself. I know you're all busy, but maybe one-on-one, once a week, talking to your employee can be helpful. Keep the communication going, the engagement with the person going, your whole workforce. And most importantly, you need to keep your emotions in check. So hard to do. You have to take that deep breath. You have to say, okay, I want to talk to this person in a positive way. I don't want any anger coming from me or saying words that I'm going to really be sorry for. So you have to be careful with that. And create that positive work environment. Encourage mutual respect for your whole department. Have meetings. Talk with people one-on-one. Make sure you know what's going on in your environment. and can't say enough, provide that positive feedback to an employee. Let them know when they have gotten positive touches from the community or from others. You know, make sure that goes in their file. Make sure you tell them you appreciate them, no matter how much they're irritating you. You should be able to always do that. Like I said, I'm staying on the positive side, but that's what I think you all want, even though you might be sitting there. I can't see you all, but, and I've done this in person. You know, that's kind of interesting to do, because you'll see looks on people's faces. What the is she talking about? I just want to get rid of this person right now. But you know what? It tends to go into great dialogue, because then I ask them, well, have you turned somebody around? What have you done? What would you recommend? And it's really great, because people will sit with each other and they'll come up with great ideas, and they'll find out, oh yeah, that did work. That's a good idea. Maybe you still want to fire someone, but hopefully I can, you know, help you turn that around. And of course, you want to give adequate support, and maybe, you know, training. Make sure they have good training programs. Or maybe if you have an employee, I'm going to say employee assistance program. It may be called something else in differently in your area, but it's a good idea to let that person know maybe they do need to get some counseling. That's okay to say to the person, because you might find out that they're going through some trauma. And let's face it, it's very easy to go through trauma right now. This has been one of the worst years and a half I've heard in human resources. People are really suffering right now. And I won't go through the things I hear. Some of them are pretty desperate that are happening to some employees. So that's where you have that conversation of, you know, referring them to a good source. Okay. Next slide. Sorry. Focus on problems, not personalities. And here I go again. But you do need to take a step back and make sure you know what kind of conversation you're going to have with the employee until you sit down with them. You know, go through your own written notes or the observations and put something positive in place for that conversation. Only focus on specific behaviors or attitudes. And I'm going to show you a couple of examples a little bit later regarding good documentation practices and what not to say and what to say. So you'll get an idea of what I'm talking about there. And always identify why it's a problem to your organization or the mission of your organization, of how you don't treat people like this. You may be treating everybody well externally, and that's great. And that's what we want you to do in your position. But you're not treating me very nice. And let me explain what I mean by that, or others. You know, we've been losing some of the people that report to you. And always think solely in terms of the job, of how it's also affecting the performance, perhaps. It may not be, because you have that star employee, right, that I talked about earlier. Be objective in your written word and in your conversation with the employee. Do not personalize it. Don't get into personal. You don't have to love the person, not even like them. I know that's hard, but the point is you want to just turn them around so at least they're respectful to everybody and they understand what your mission is. But you don't have to tolerate them not treating others the way everybody should be treated. And make sure, though, you listen to this person you're talking to. You might find out things where you can help them out also. And write yourself your report first. I don't know if any of you that have HR departments today, or you're an HR professional, or you have them on staff, but I always say, if you do have someone who wears that HR hat, as we call it, make sure that when you put your document together, you know, you have them help you review it before sitting down with that person to talk to them. Okay, here we go. Documentation. And people always hear me, and sometimes they get tired of hearing me. First question I'll ask if they have a problem with an employee, whether it's performance or what we're talking about today, that challenging employee, I will always ask, have you documented this? No, but I don't have time to do it. Okay, that's not a good answer. I understand what you're saying, though. It's hard to sit down and put the written word in front of someone, but it's very important, and it's important for you, the organization, and it's important for them to see in writing what your concerns are. But always refrain from using subjective comments and making conclusions. Use very objective language. Do not give specific facts, not your feelings or opinions. Now I'm going to give you a couple of examples. Remember, they're snapshots. I'm not giving you, I mean, it's going to be more than this in your actual documentation. But here's what an example of a poor documentation or words. You're irritable and refuse to communicate. Well, certainly you are, but it's better to give an example and explain what happened and why you feel that way. So this is a true story of a call, not the person's name. I used a different name, but Mark, you locked yourself in your office and refused to respond. Now that sounds pretty serious, but obviously Mark must have been having a bad day. So you sit Mark down. Maybe you just have a conversation with Mark, right? And document you had the conversation. You're not going to go through a discipline process yet. And you say, Mark, why do you think you did that? So it's a conversation. Explain to me. I was really concerned about that. And you wouldn't even respond to me. And that's scary to have a locked door. And you hope to bring Mark out, don't you? But you explain to Mark, you really can't continue to do that. And who knows what you'll hear from Mark. Mark may have just been having that bad day, got angry for the moment, was irritated with somebody who called him, or maybe he's having personal problems and needs some counseling or help, and you can discuss that with him. So yeah, true story. I hear a lot of different things. The good part about us, I'll put this in here, we're a very confidential program, absolutely confidential. We're a third party. It's only between you and me, or Sonia and you. Sonia is my cohort. So I always say rest assured, and people do ask us, is this confidential? Oh, absolutely. Another piece of documentation, the next slide. Bad attitude. Of course we say that, but we can't just say you have a bad attitude. Better to say, Brian, you seldom acknowledge that you understand an assignment that I give you by saying yes, or when do you want it done? Whenever I tell you, Brian, that a particular task has not been completed properly, you contradict me and try to change the subject. Well, what do you think? Brian may be an angry person, or he doesn't want to listen to people. He doesn't like someone to tell him what to do. Or maybe you find out Brian doesn't know that he's doing this. So you ask Brian, do you realize you're doing this? And if you do, why are you doing this? Oh, Brian, that's not good. I want to work well with you, Brian, and I know you want to work well with me. So let's figure out a different way, a better way to communicate with each other. So certainly you can't tolerate Brian doing that. Next slide. This is the paradigm, always with documentation. Who you're talking to, what happened, all this clearly in your documentation, where it happened, when it happened, why did it happen? And of course, the how did it happen? That means giving examples. Always important to take a look at that and make sure you have all the information on that document for the employee to look at. Now I have a little test for you. It's called What's Wrong with This Memo? So documenting just misconduct and poor performance. This is to Meg for her personnel file, for Marty, her manager, Meg has become very uncooperative lately. Several times she has questioned my decisions and the decisions of the organization, implying bad faith. I have spoken to Meg before, but to no avail. This time I warn Meg that if she has a problem with one of my decisions, she must bring it to my attention in a professional manner. Unprofessional outbursts will no longer be accepted. So what do you think is wrong with this memo? And I take a look at it and I'll share with you. I don't know how we want to go do this, but there definitely are some things wrong with it. And I think you probably catched on to that after we just had our conversation about documentation.
Dawn, are we seeing anyone respond in the chat?
I don't know that they know to. If they have hints, they can certainly put them in the chat.
Okay.
I'll go through it if
They don't have to rewrite the whole memo, just as a heads up on that one, right?
Right.
What are some things that you're seeing? I'm seeing certainly that there's some missing information here.
I'm sure you do. Yeah.
And some interesting perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I won't take a lot of time with this, but I can go through what those missing items are right now.
Please, yeah.
Yeah. Some of the missing, did you all notice there's no date there? No date whatsoever. There's no list of specific examples as we've just talked about, whether they're current or past. They're using subjective terms. What do I mean by that? Well, come on, Marty. You tell Meg that she's not very professional. Well, what the heck does that mean? You got to explain how you believe that Meg is not professional. In fact, it's very rude to her, quite frankly. You're kind of blasting her here. Unprofessional outbursts will no longer be accepted. You're not professional. You don't, that you've warned her. Well, how many times did you warn her? You don't give any dates. You say you've talked to her to no avail. What does that mean? Does that mean she's not following up with the conversations you've had with her? So he is not giving her any idea of what he's talking about. And he's assuming she knows all that. Well, okay, maybe she does know some of it, but you can't put that in a piece of documentation.
They're chiming in, Maureen. Yeah, they're chiming in no date or time, no specific incident.
Right, yes, I see that. Yeah, I'll tell you.
There's everything's pretty vague on some of this. There's not a lot of details as to what it would be. Yeah.
Wonderful. You all caught on to what's happening here. It's sort of funny with a memo like this because you can look at it and say, oh, well, gee, that's great. Marty put something in place, right? Yeah. No, Marty, you did not. And you know, how is Meg supposed to feel good in her relationship of you being her supervisor and understanding?
And Maureen, I have a follow-up question regarding the documentation. Yes. Should you let the employee know that you're going to be documenting some behavior things? Should they be aware that documentation is taking place?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Okay. Absolutely. No, good question. Yep. I do a whole webinar on documentation, and it's important. Well, isn't it? It's important for all kinds of events, isn't it? In the workplace that you document everything. Oh yeah, everyone should be aware. There should be a policy in place too, a discipline policy about steps taken with a proper language in the policy, though. You have to be careful with that kind of policy. But yes, an awareness, you know, this is our process.
On both sides.
On both sides. Yeah, that's the whole thing. You want to be clear with everybody and make people comfortable. Yeah.
Great.
You want the person to know what will happen. He doesn't let her know if the behavior continues and what the purpose of the memo is. You know, really, I don't like memo of warning, to be honest with you. I like if you're going to sit down with somebody, And I know a lot of organizations I talk to call them performance plans. I like that, performance plan, coaching.
Mhm.
I really don't like the words like corrective action or warning. I'd like to start out on the positive. Yeah. Great, thank you. Good responses.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Yes.
Let me advance.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, just a follow-up. We're coming to the end here. Make sure the problem has been solved. And we've been talking about that. You know, check back with the employee, you know, have another conversation with them, see how they're doing. Always give that positive feedback to all your employees, right? There's got to be positive somewhere. Or when you follow up with this challenging employee, say, thank you, you've been listening. I've got to tell you, I just love the turnaround. But if you still have some concerns with me, you know, let's talk further. Point out any remaining problems because they might still exist, and always continue to monitor. It's in the long run, initially, I know you're all very busy with the wonderful programs you do. And sometimes this can be a problem of taking the time, but it's truly worthwhile. And in the long run, it'll be less time. Don't delay having those conversations. It makes it worse to do it later on. Next slide. And just important points to remember. This is our last slide. Never ignore a problem. I know, easy to do. We don't like to confront, and you're busy. Manage your own feelings first. Here I go again, but so very important. You don't want something terrible to come out. I just talked to somebody the other day and told off her employee. And you know, I felt bad because she's a really nice, great person. And I said, well, that's okay. Just go back, have a nice conversation. But next time, maybe wait later in the day or take a deep breath before you talk to that employee. And if you all want to create a positive work environment for yourselves and for your employees, and focus on problems, not personalities, stick to the facts, and figure out some positive strategies within your own organization of how to deal with all of your employees when you see they're having problems or are not treating others well. You know, like I said, training perhaps, making sure you have conversations with them, and listening. Listening is so very important to all your employees. Don't you be the one that keeps on talking like I am right now. And here's the final page, and this is who we are. Oh, questions first. I'm sorry, questions first. So I'm listening. I'm listening.
So Maureen, I feel compelled to address why I lock myself in my office. And I've learned that mindfulness is really important, and I've engaged in hot yoga exercises to kind of deal with stress. And I just really wanted to explain myself in terms of my behavior. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to share that with
Thank
the
you.
attendees.
I'm so glad I gave you that opportunity. That's good. Yeah, that's the whole point, right?
That's the whole point, right? Exactly. You never know. You never know what's going on behind those closed doors.
No, you don't.
Yeah. So Maureen, thank you so much for your insight, and we want to open things up for our attendees to ask some questions, and please do so. Dawn, let me check with you to see if there's anything in the chat or anyone wants to raise. I know I have a couple of follow-up questions, but I just want to give our attendees time. Glenn.
Yeah. First of all, Maureen, thank you so much for this.
Sure.
We've had a long history of working together.
Yes, we have.
You see what we have to deal with Mark every day at the World Federation. So we may be calling you separately for some
that's
tips.
okay. And I'll keep it confidential.
Exactly. But now this has been great. I'm going to need to jump off in just a couple of minutes, but I want to say to everybody that when we did this at Boys and Girls Clubs of America, and it was for, I mean, it's still going, but it's a number of years back, as was indicated when we first started. We had our legal counsel actually determine over the course of 1 year what it would approximately would have cost our local clubs had they not followed some of the advice that was given by 501c in terms of documentation, in terms of how to have the right conversations, and the litigious society where people were just, and still are, taking employers to court for whatever it may be, justifiably or not. It was in the millions of dollars that were saved, millions of dollars saved by local clubs by just having followed and done the right thing. And had they not, and much of which they didn't feel like they had time for or understand, really was a big time saver. And that money was, of course, not dollars in their pocket, but it was dollars that would have taken away from their mission and what they could have done with children. And in some situations, put them out of business. So Maureen, thank you for all of that you've done with our clubs in the US. And now all this may not be word for word of how it works in different parts of the world, but it's still solid advice regardless of where you are. Thank you.
That's very nice. So nice to see you today.
Great seeing you.
Thanks, Glenn. Dawn, anything in the chat that we want to point to? I have a couple of questions to get things started. So Maureen, what strategies, obviously organizations are a collection of people, right? Great organizations have great people, right? That
Absolutely.
is how it works, right?
Yeah.
And often the message is collaborate, work with teams, go partner with someone in another department, work in this environment where there's lots of sharing. And with that, there's bound to be conflict, right? There's bound to be interpersonal dynamics. How do you suggest when supervisors are seeing dynamics play out between employees, not necessarily between the supervisor and the employee, but that dynamic that might be happening between employees and their ability or inability to work together? And what suggestions or approaches would you recommend there?
Well, that's hard. That's difficult, but I would talk to them separately. I would never recommend bringing people together if they're having conflict, at least initially,
right? And
finding out from each one, why do they realize they're reacting to the other person this way, and find out why. And, maybe through that you resolve something, or maybe you find out something. Maybe the other person has been harassing, creating a hostile work environment. So then you have to do an investigation, right? But talk to each one individually.
Okay.
And assess what they've said to you. And maybe you need to do further investigation or find ways to make each one feel good about each other, right? Of what each brings to the table and the importance of working together. But first you got to find out what's going on individually. Right. And I never recommend bringing them both into the same room together. No.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Mark, there's a couple of questions in the chat. One from Tim. Does it make sense to have regular coaching sessions with all team members to manage issues before they fester? And wants to know if you can discuss a person's motivation. Is it a skill issue or a will issue on the employee's part? Skill is an easier fix. Understanding the will of a person is a deeper dive. So are coaching sessions a good idea? And what do you think of
you mean I don't know about bringing everybody in for a coaching sessions one-on-one, but I also understand probably that it's always important to have training for all your staff, all your employees. And maybe you bring in a speaker or someone to talk to them, or you talk to them about some concerns you've seen with your department lately, of course, not addressing the person or the people. And maybe you need a special trainer to come in and talk to them, or maybe yourself as a supervisor. Maybe it's a monthly staff meeting to bring up some things you want to put forward to your staff. Am I answering that? I guess I'm not. Please let me know if I'm not answering it. There was two parts to this question. What was the other?
And Tim he's here happily,
Yeah.
Tim, if you'd like to unmute yourself. He's just wondering also about motivation, right? Like, can you discuss the need to understand a person's motivation, right?
Okay.
Whether that's an issue with their skill, or is there some sort of, he's calling it
okay.
will.
Right. No, that's a good question. And that's why you're going to have the conversation with the employee. And I always say it's always initially a conversation. I never say get into the documentation process and discipline process until you find out what's going on with the employee. And like I say, sometimes you find out all kinds of things. Sometimes it could be they don't understand their job. You thought they did, but they really don't. Maybe they need more training. Maybe they need to take a look at that job description. Job descriptions are always going to be so important, to go through their job description again, or they just might not understand something you can help them out with. So that's what you're going to, it's a process of finding out what's going on with the employee. It's the conversation, a word that we use a lot, but important, the engagement of that person. And I think that's important between the supervisor and the employee, is that one-on-one.
Yeah.
And not letting something fester. Don't let something fester, get to it as soon as possible. I hope I answered that.
Tim, did you want to weigh in on this?
Well, Maureen, I just wanted to clarify the first part of the question was having, as opposed to waiting till something blows up, maybe it'd be a good way to head problems off by having regular scheduled coaching sessions.
Oh, okay. Yes.
With each individual person. So.
Oh, yes. I agree with that. Yeah, the one-on-one. I know in our own organization, we do that with everybody. I do it with my own supervisor, is the one-on-one, and we do it once a week. We take time out once a week to have a conversation and an update with each other. Yes, I do think that's important.
And Maureen, as a follow-up to that question, I know there are times when, let's just classify that coaching as these are coaching conversations, dialogue. You're not reached the level or triggered the level of documentation and performance.
Right.
But at some point in time, you as a manager, as a leader, you are investing your time and effort through that coaching, through that informal conversation, ultimately to avoid having to go there. But at some point in time, they have to go there, right?
You have to go there. Yes, good.
You have to go there.
You have to go there. And that's why to have a process in place, a training for all your supervisors of what your discipline process involves and the documentation.
Okay.
And it starts out with we call verbal documentation, and then written. And then you kind of go through, hopefully everything's taken care of, but then you might have to think about suspension. And then ultimately the last step would be termination.
Yeah.
But coaching is good, the one-on-one coaching. Mm-hmm. Or if you see somebody who's changed in your organization, all of a sudden they're not doing their job, or they seem to be irritable. Mm-hmm. That's where it's good to sit down. And as we just said, that's where the conversation. Gee, are you okay, Joe? You don't seem yourself the last week, and mm-hmm. I'm concerned about it. Now, we can't delve into too much of the personal, you can't say, well, do you have some medical problem? Tell me what it is. Mm-hmm. But you can find out, and we all have, that an employee is going through a tough time, and then, recommend some, they get counseling. It depends, of course, what they're sharing with you, or they're having childcare problems, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you give them time to work that out. And the good story is they may get it worked out, or maybe you have some referrals to give to them. But the whole point here is you're finding out what's going on with mm-hmm. your employee. Mm-hmm. And did I?
Yes, you did. Thank you very much. And Dawn, I think there's a couple of more questions in here. I see one from Raphael. And Maureen, of course, Raphael says many thanks to you. And he agrees totally that termination firing is the worst case scenario. So obviously you want to avoid that. In particular, his question is centered around labor law, of course, provides guidance, right? The laws of the country and labor law.
Of your country, guidance. Yeah.
But then he says, what do you think could be the reasons in a nonprofit I guess, reasons for ultimately termination. Raphael, do I have that correct in terms of that question?
Yeah, I asked him to clarify. He said, what could be the reasons or examples of when you really do need to terminate someone's contract
Okay.
or a volunteer?
Okay.
The question I had, Maureen, too.
Okay.
Volunteers are another
Okay.
kind of creature. So
Let me start out with employees. Well, it could be something egregious, right? That would be that they, well, first of all, let me start again. They're not following the process you've gone through with them, the discipline process. So let's say performance. You know, you've tried to help them out, you've tried to get training, they're still not doing the job correctly. That takes more time, right? But you finally say to them, you know, Mary, this is not working out. I don't understand. I've tried to help you out. You're still making mistakes on the reports. You're not getting them in timely. I've given you the opportunity to change that. And I'm talking to you again. And I must tell you, Mary, if the next report doesn't get in on time and it's not accurate, it may be cause for further discipline up to including termination. And then you're at a point that either Mary shows you the next time that she gets it in. Always make sure you say thereafter too in your documentation, that it has to continue on. And then you get to the point where you may be saying to Mary, unfortunately, she doesn't get the report in time. There's lots of mistakes as usual. You're going to have to ask her to leave. You may be going through an investigation with somebody. They've been accused of harassment, and you've given them the opportunity to training. And that's always a hard one. I don't know if it's a good example for me because you have to really go through a process with that, right? Investigation, and they may deny it. But if ultimately you still get more, you still hear from more people that they're still being harassed. And I'm not just talking about sexual harassment. It can be any type of harassment. Bullying, hostile work environment. That's an investigation process. Sometimes you put a person on suspension for that. And ultimately there'll come a point where you may have to term them. Immediate reasons, of course, it could be you have definitive proof of them doing something that's not right in the workplace, taking money, you know, embezzlement, safety issues. You have to have a lot of proof of that though. Now I'm real careful with what I do. If somebody calls me on the hotline or email, when I know it's a legal situation, I'll share with all of you because I'm not an attorney. And if I think it's really sticky and you can have a lot of problems of ultimately terming someone, I will tell you, hey, check with your attorney, your employment attorney. I'm not trying to get out of it. I'll give you as much help as I can or answer the question. But some of it can be tough, especially if you have a long-term employee, right? Or someone's over the age of 40. You know, we have to be so very careful. It's not easy, but you can't ignore it. You can't ignore it. You know, you got to get that documentation going and really telling somebody, you got to take this seriously. Mm-hmm. You got to take it. I'm getting the feeling you don't want to work here. You can say that. Mm-hmm. You can say that. You can also long-term employee, I'm giving a long answer here, but a long-term employee has been with you for, let's say 10 years, an idea. Have them go home for a day and think about what they've been doing. Mm-hmm. Let them think about it, even pay them to go home and come back and let you know how they're going to change things. That's just an idea.
Great. Well, Maureen, thank you so much for this, for your insight, your experiences, your candor, and quite frankly, your optimism. These are always very difficult things. Often people will avoid those, and in a way, to Glenn's point, are financially detrimental to the organization. And what you've provided is a point of view, a perspective, a way as approaching it in a positive way to avoid those kinds of costs to the organization, reputationally and financially. Right. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. I've enjoyed talking to all of you, and please do take advantage of our program.
Absolutely. So I wanted to just do it, and I think we put your contact information in here, Maureen, if people have questions. If we didn't,
Yes.
we'll make sure we get it out, Dawn,
Right.
to
I'll send it in
everyone.
the follow-up.
Yeah,
In the
email,
follow-up
for sure.
email. Yep.
Yeah.
So Dawn is going to send a follow-up email with a survey. Just again, we want feedback from all of you around how do we make these webcasts better? How do we source and curate topics that you want to know more about? Please let us know. We take that feedback seriously and we'll apply that accordingly. The next webcast is in late July. We're working on a subject oriented around global youth unemployment, which is a major issue right now, especially with the pandemic of what young people are facing, going into the workforce and the limited opportunities there, and what strategies organizations like yours could be implementing to deal with that particular crisis. The webcast is going to be on this particular webcast, like all webcasts, will be on the website. And that's at www.wfyc.org. So with that, we are right at the 12 o'clock hour Eastern time. Thank you all. There's my contact information if you need to reach me or Dawn. Thank you again. And we look forward to seeing you and engaging with you in the months to come. Take care. Thank you, Maureen.
Thank you, everyone.
you. Thanks,
Bye-bye. Have a
Maureen.
good day.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.